Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and One Night. Now, when it was the 851st night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Zayn Al-Mawasif said to Masur, An thou be occupied with love of me, make of us some verses on that hath passed between us. With love and gladness, he replied, and improvised the following qasida. Stand thou, and hear what fell to me, for love of your gazelle to dree. Shot me with a white doe and her shaft, O glances, woundingly. Love was my ruin, for was I straitened by long ecstasy. I loved and wooed a young coquette, girded by strong artillery, whom in a garth I first beheld, a form whose sight was symmetry. I greeted her, and when she deigned greeting return, Salam, quoth she. What be thy name? Saith I. She said, My name declares my quality. Zayn Al-Mawasif I am hight. Cried I, O deign I mercy see. Such is the longing of my heart. No lover claim rivalry. Quoth she, With me and thou in love, and to enjoy me pleadest plea. I want of thee, O mutual wealth. Beyond all come my wants, O thee. I want of thee full many a robe, of sendal, silk, and damaskry, a quarter quintal eke of musk. These of one night shall pay the fee. Pearls, unions, and carnelian stones, the bestest best of jewelry. Of fairest patience showed I show, in contrary Albi. At last she favored me one night, when rose the moon a crescent we, and stranger blame me for her sake. I say, O blamers, listen ye. She showeth locks of goodly length, and black as night its blee, while on her cheek the roses glow, like laze flame incendiary. In every eyelash is a sword, and every glance hath archery. Her liplets twain old wine contain, and dews of fount like purity. Her teeth resemble strings of pearls, arrayed in line and fresh from sea. Her neck is like that of a doe, pretty and carven perfectly. Her bosom is a marble slab, whence lies two breasts like towers, and on her stomach shows a crease, perfumed with rich perfumery, beneath which there lurks a thing, limit of mine expectancy, a something rounded, cushioned high, and plump my lord's too high to degree. To me 'tis like royal throne, whither my longings wander free. There 'twixt two pillars man shall find benches of high-built tracery. It hath specific qualities, drive sanest man to insanity. Full mouth, it like mouth of neck, or well begirt by stony key. Firm lips, with camelries compare, and shows its eyes of cramacy. And draw thou nigh with doughty will, to do thy doing lustily. Thou find it fain to face thy bout, and strong and fierce in valiancy. It bendeth backwards every brave, shorn of his brave battlery. At times, imberbe, but full of spunk, to battle with the paynimery. 'Twill show thee liveliness galore, and perfect in its raillery. Zayn Al-Mawasif it is like, complete in charms and courtesy. To her dear arms one night I came, and wan meat given lawfully. I passed with her that same night, best of my nights, in gladdest glee. And when morning rose, she rose, and crescent like her visame. Then swayed her supple form as sways the lance lopped from limber tree. And when farewelling me, she cried, When shall such nights return to me? Then I replied, O eyne light, when he vouchsafeth his decree. Zayn Al-Mawasif was delighted with this ode, and the utmost gladness got hold of her. Then said she, O Masur, day dawn draweth nigh, and there is naught for it save to fly for fear of scandal and spy. He replied, I hear and obey, and rising led her to her lodging, after which he returned to his quarters, and passed the rest of the night pondering on her charms. When the morning morrowed with its sheen and shone, he made ready a splendid present, and carried it to her, and sat by her side. And thus they abode a while in all solace of life and its delights, till one day there came to Zayn Al-Mawasif a letter from her husband, reporting to her his speedy return. Thereupon she said to herself, May Allah not keep him, nor quicken him. If he come hither, our life will be troubled. Would heaven I might despair of him. Presently entered Masur, and sat with her at chat, as was his wont, whereupon she said to him, O Masur, I have received a missive from my mate, announcing his speedy return from his wayfaring. What is to be done, since neither of us without the other can live? He replied, I know not, but thou art better able to judge, being acquainted with the ways of thy man, more by token than thou art one of the sharpest wit of women, and past mistress of devices, such as devise that whereof fail the wise. Quoth she, He is a hard man, and jealous of his household, but when he shall come home, and thou hearest of his coming, do thou repair to him, and salute him, and sit down by his side, saying, O my brother, I am a druggist. Then buy of him somewhat of drugs and spices of sort, and call upon him frequently, and prolong thy talks with him, and gainsay him not in whatsoever he shall bid thee, so happily that I would contrive may betide, as if it were by chance. I hear and I obey, quoth Masur, and he fared forth from her with heart afire for love. When her husband came home, she rejoiced in meeting him, and after saluting him, bade him welcome. But he looked on her face, and seeing it pale and sallow, for she had washed it with saffron, using one of women's arts, asked her of her case. She answered that she had been sick, she and her women, from the time of his wayfaring, adding, Verily our hearts have been engrossed with thoughts of thee, because of the length of time absence. And she went on to complain to him of the misery of separation, and to pour forth copious tears, saying, Hadst thou but a companion with thee, my heart had not borne all this cark and care for thee. So Allah upon thee, O my lord, travel not again without a comrade, and cut me not off from news of thee, that my heart and mind may be at rest concerning thee. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 852nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Zayn Al-Mawasif said to her mate, Travel not without comrade, and cut me off from news of thee, that my heart and mind may be at rest concerning thee, he replied, With love and gladness. By Allah, thy bade is so good indeed, and right as thy rede. By thy life it shall be as thou dost heed. Then he unpacked some of his stock and trade, and carrying the goods to his shop, opened it, and sat down to sell in the Soko. No sooner had he taken his place than, lo and behold, up came Masur, and saluting him sat down by his side, and began talking, and talked with him a while. Then he pulled out a purse, and taking forth gold, handed it to Zayn Al-Mawasif's man, and said, Give me the worth of these dinars and drugs and spices of sorts, that I may sell them in my shop. The Jew replied, I hear and I obey, and I gave him what he sought. And Masur continued to pay him frequent visits, till one day the merchant said to him, I have a mind to take me a man to partner in trade. Quoth Masur, And I also desire to take a partner, for my father was a merchant in the land of Al-Yaman, and left me great store of money, and I fear lest it fare from me. Quoth the Jew, turning towards him, Wilt thou be my partner? And I will be thy partner, and a true friend and comrade to thee at home and abroad, and I will teach thee selling and buying, giving and taking. And Masur rejoined, With all my heart. So the merchant carried him to his place, and seated him in the vestibule, while he went in to his wife, and said to him, I have provided me with a partner, and have bidden him hither as a guest. So do thou get us ready good guest cheer. When as she heard this, she rejoiced, divining that it was Masur, and made ready a magnificent banquet of her delight in the success of her device. Then when the guest drew nigh, her husband said to her, Come out with me to him, and bid him welcome, and say thou gladdenest us. But Zayn Al-Mawasif made a show of anger, crying, Wilt thou have me display myself before a strange man? I take refuge with Allah. Though thou cut me to bits, I will not appear before him. Rejoined him, Why shouldest thou be ashamed at him, seeing that he is a Nazarene, and we are Jews, and to boot we are to become chums, and he and I? Quoth she, I am not minded to present myself before a strange man on whom I have never once set eyes, and whom I know not any wise. Her husband thought she spoke sooth, and ceased not to importune her, till she rose, and veiling herself, took the food, and went out to Masur, and welcomed him. Whereupon he bowed his head groundwards as he were ashamed, and the Jews, seeing such dejection, said to him, Doubtless this man is a devotee. They ate their fill, and the table being removed, and wine set on. As for Zayn Al-Mawasif, she sat over against Masur, and gazed on him, and he gazed on her till ended day, when he went home with a heart to fire a prey. But the Jew abode pondering the grace and the comeliness of him, and as soon as it was night, his wife, according to custom, served him with supper, and they seated themselves before it. Now he had a mockingbird, which was wont, whenever he sat down to meat, to come and eat with him and hover over his head. But in his absence the fowl was grown familiar with Masur, and used to flutter about him as he sat at meals. Now when Masur disappeared and the master returned, it knew him not, and would not draw near him, and this made him thoughtful concerning his case, and the fowl withdrawing from him. As for Zayn Al-Mawasif, she could not sleep with her heart thinking of Masur, and thus it was with her a second and even a third night, till the Jew became aware of her condition, and watching her while she sat distraught, began to suspect something wrong. On the fourth night he woke in the middle thereof, and heard his wife babbling in her sleep, and naming Masur, what while she lay on her husband's bosom, wherefore he misdoubted her. But he dissembled his suspicions, and when morning morrowed, he repaired to his shop and sat therein. Presently up came Masur and saluted him. He returned his salam and said to him, "Welcome, O my brother," adding anon, "I have wished for thee." And he sat talking with him for an hour or so, after which he said to him, "Rise, O brother, and hie with me to my house, that we may enter into a pact of brotherhood." Replied Masur, "With joy and goodly gree," and they repaired to the Jew's house, where the master went in and told his wife of Masur's visit, for the purpose of conditioning their partnership, and said, "Make us ready a goodly entertainment, and needs must thou be present and witness our brotherhood." But she replied, "Allah upon thee, cause me not show myself to this strange man, for I have no mind to company with him." So he held his peace, and forbore to press her, and bade the waiting woman bring food and drink. Then he called the mockingbird, but it knew not its lord, and settled upon Masur's lap. And the Jew said to him, "O my master, what is thy name?" He answered, "My name is Masur." Whereupon the Jew remembered that this was the name which his wife had repeated all night long in her sleep. Presently he raised his head, and saw her making signs with her forefingers to Masur, and motioning to him with her eyes, wherefore he knew that he had been completely cozened and cuckolded, and said, "O my lord, excuse me for a while till I fetch my kinsmen, so that they may present at our swearing brotherhood." Quoth Masur, "Do what seemeth good to thee." Whereupon the Jew went forth the house, and returned privily by a back way. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 853rd night, she pursued, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Zayn Al-Mawasif's husband said to Masur, 'Excuse me a while I fetch my cousins to witness the brother bond between me and thee.' Then he went forth, and privily returned behind the sitting room, there took his station hard by a window, which gave upon the saloon, and whence he could watch them without him seeing them. Suddenly quoth Zayn Al-Mawasif to her maid Sukub, "Whither is thy master gone?" And quoth she, "He's gone without the house." Cried the mistress, "Lock the door, and bar it with iron, and open thou not till he knock after thou hast told me." Answered Sukub, "So shall it be done." Then while her husband watched them, she rose, and filling a cup with wine flavored with powdered musk and rose water, went close to Masur, who sprang up to meet her, saying, "By Allah, the water of thy mouth is sweeter than this wine." "Here it is for thee," said she, and filling her mouth with wine, gave him a drink thereof, whilst he gave her the like to drink. After which she sprinkled him with rose water from front to foot, till the perfume scented the whole place. All this while the Jew was looking on and marveling at the stress of love that was between them, and his heart was filled with fury for what he saw, and he was not only wroth but jealous, and exceedingly jealous. Then he went out again, and coming in the door found it locked, and knocked a loud knock of the excess of his rage, whereupon quoth Sukub, "O my lady, here is my master." And quoth Zayn Al-Mawasif, "Open to him, would that Allah had not brought him back in safety." So Sukub went and opened the door to the Jew, who said to him, "What ailed thee to lock the door?" Quoth she, "It hath never ceased to be locked thus during thine absence, nor hath it been opened night nor day." And cried he, "Thou hast done well, this pleaseth me." Then he went into Masur, laughing and dissembling his chagrin, and said to him, "O Masur, let us put off this conclusion of our pact of brotherhood this day, and defer it to another." Replied Masur, "As thou wilt." and hied him home, leaving the Jew pondering his case, and knowing not what to do. For his heart was sore troubled, and he said to himself, Even the mockingbird disowneth me, and the slave girl shut the door on my face, and favour another. And of his exceeding chagrin he fell to reciting these couplets. Masur joys life, made fair by all delights of day, fulfilled of boons, while mine the sorest grief displays. The days have falsed me in the breast of her I love, and in my heart are fires which are all consuming blaze. Yea, time was clear for thee, but now 'tis past and gone, while yet her lovely charms thy wit incenses days. Espied these eyes of mine her gifts of loveliness. O hard my case, and sore my woe of spite ways. I saw the maiden of the tribe deal rich old wine, of lips like Salsabil to friend my love betrays. Ay, my old mockingbird, thou dost betray my breast, and to a rival teachest love and lovers' ways. Strange things indeed, and wondrous saw these eyne of mine, which were they sleep drowned still from sleep's abyss would raise. I see my best beloved hath forsworn my love, and eke like a mockingbird for me a startled strays. By truth of Allah, Lord of wolds, who, whatso wills, his fate for creatures works, and none for his high gainsays. For sure I'll deal to that ungodly wight his due, who, but to sate his wicked will, her heart withdrew. When Zayn Al-Mawasif heard this, her side muscles trembled, and quoth she to her handmaid, Heardest thou those lines? Whereupon quoth the girl, I never heard him in my born days recite the likes of these verses, but let him say what he will. Then, having assured herself of the truth of his suspicions, the Jew began to sell all his property, saying to himself, Unless I part them by removing her from her motherland, and twain will not turn back from this that they are engaged in. No, never. So then he had converted all his possessions into coin. He forged a letter and read it to Zayn Al-Mawasif, declaring that it had come from his kinsman who invited him to visit him and his wife. She asked, How long shall we tarry with them? And he answered, 12 days. Accordingly she consented to this, and said, Shall I take any of my maids with me? Whereto he replied, Take Hubub and Sukub, and leave Kutub here. Then he made ready a handsome camel litter for his spouse and her women, and settled to set out with them. While she sent on to the leman, telling him what had betided her, and saying, O Masur, and the trysting time that is between us past, and I come not back, know that he hath cheated and cozened us, and planned a plot to separate us each from the other. So forget thou not the plighted faith betwixt us, for I fear that he hath found out our love, and I dread his craft and perfidy. Then whilst her man was busy about his march, she fell a-weeping and lamenting, and no peace was left her, night or day. Her husband saw this, but took no note thereof, and when she saw there was scant help for it, she gathered together her clothes and gears, and deposited them with her sister, telling her what had befallen her. Then she farewelled her, and going out from her drowned in tears, returned to her own house, where she found her husband had bought the camels, and was busy loading them, having set apart the handsomest dromedary for her riding. And when she saw this, and knew that needs must she be separated from Masur, she waxed clean distraught. Presently it chanced the Jew went out on some business of this, so she fared forth to that first or outer door, and read thereon these couplets. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 854th night, she resumed, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Zayn Al-Mawasif saw her spouse summon the camels, and knew that the march needs must be, she waxed clean distraught. Presently it chanced that the Jew went out on some business, so he fared forth to the first door, and wrote thereon these couplets. Bear our salams, O dove, from this our stead, from lover to beloved far severed. Bid him for me ne'en cease to yearn and mourn, or happy days and hours for ever fled. Eke I in grief shall ever mourn and yearn, dwelling on days of love and lustihead. Long was our joyance, seeming aye to last, when night and morning to reunion led. Till croaked the raven of the world one day, his cursed croak, and did our union dead. We sped, and left the homestead dark and void, its gates unpeopled, and its dwellers sped. Then she went to the second door, and wrote thereon these couplets. O who passest this door, by Allah see the charms of my fair in the glooms and make plea. For me saying, I think of the past and weep, yet boot me no tears flowing full and free. Say, and fail thee patience for what befell, scatter earth and dust on the head of thee, and o'er travel lands east and west, and deem God sufficeth thy case, so bear patiently. Then she went to the third door and wept sore, and thereon wrote these couplets. Fair, softly Masur, and her sanctuary thy seek, and read what adore writ she. Ne'er forget, love plight, if true man how oft has savoured night's bitter and sweetest scree. O Masur, forget not her neighbourhood, for we thee must her gladness and joyance flee. Be wept, thou dearest united days, when thou camest veiled in secrecy. When forsake of us over farthest wone, span the wold for us dive and see. Allah bless the past days, and how glad they were, when in gardens of fancy the flowers plucked we. The nights of union from us are fled, and parting glooms dim their radiancy. And had this lasted as hoped we, but he left only our breast and the rosary. Will revolving days on reunion dawn? Then our vow to the Lord shall accomplished be. Learn thou our lots are in hand of him, who on lines of skull writes our destiny. Then she wept with sore weeping, and returned to the house, wailing and remembering what had passed, and saying, Glory be to God who hath decreed to us this. And her affliction redoubled for severance from her beloved, and her departure from her motherland, and she recited these couplets. Allah's peace on thee, house of vacancy, ceased in thee all our joys, all our jubilance. O thou dove of the homestead, ne'er cease to be moan, whose moons and full moons sore severance dree. Masur, fare softly and mourn our loss, loving thee our eyes lose their brilliancy. Would thy sight had seen on our marching day tears shed by a heart in hell's flagrancy. Forget not the plight in the garth shade pledge, when we sat enveiled in privacy. Then she presented herself before her husband, who lifted her into the litter he had made for her, and when she found herself on the camel's back, she recited these couplets. The Lord empty house to thee peace decree. Long we bore therein growth of misery. Would my life thread were shorn in that safe abode, and o night I had died in mine ecstasy. Homesickness I mourn, and my strangerhood irks my soul, nor the riddle of future I see. Would I watch shall I ever the house wreath, and find it as erst home of joy and glee. Said her husband, O Zayn Al-Mawasif, grieve not for thy departure from thy dwelling, for thou shalt return to it ere long, inshallah. And he went on to comfort her heart and soothe her sorrow. Then all set out and fared on till they came without the town, and struck into the high road, whereupon she knew that separation was certain, and this was grievous to her. And while such things happened, Masur sat in his quarters, pondering his case, and that of his mistress, and his heart forewarned him of severance. So he rose without stay and delay, and repairing to her house, found the outer door padlocked, and read the couplets she had written thereon, upon which he fell down in fainting fit. When he came to himself, he opened the first door, and entering read what was written upon the second, and likewise upon the third doors, whereupon passion and love-longing and distraction grew on him. So he went forth and hastened in her tracks, till he came up with a light caravan, and found her at the rear, whilst her husband rode in the van because of his merchandise. When he saw her, he clung to the litter, weeping and wailing for the anguish of parting, and reciting these couplets. Would I wot for what crime shot and pierced are we, through the days with estrangement's archery. O my heart's desire, to thy door I came, one day when high waxed mine expectancy. But I found the home waste as the wold and void, and I planed my pine and groaned wretchedly. And I asked the walls of my friends who fared with my heart and pawn in impendency, and they said, all marched from the camp and left, and ambushed sorrow on hill and lea. And writ on the walls did they write as writ, folk who keep their faith while the worlds are three. And now Zayn Al-Mawasif heard these lines. She knew that it was Masur. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my telling of this tale for this day, until it be morrow.